Hi folks, and welcome to this week's edition of All About Real Estate. I'm Gary Hennessy from Professionals Real Estate. Last week I said we were going to be talking to a building inspector, and I thought, hang on a minute, we haven't done the paperwork side of it yet, so we're going to skip the building inspector until next week. And this week I want to talk about 3 pieces of paperwork that you're going to have to deal with in terms of purchasing a property. Now, the paperwork I'm going to talk about is specifically related to South Australian purchases because every purchase is different. Every state has different paperwork and the process is different. So if you're watching this outside of South Australia, I'm going to be talking specifically about South Australian paperwork, so it won't be relevant to your state. For those guys in South Australia, when you go to an open inspection, you look at a property, and if you like it, you're probably going to ask the agent, well, how do we move forward? And the most common way of moving forward and the most common form that people will see is this little fella here, and this is called a Notice of Offer to Purchase Residential Land. It's not a contract, it's basically saying, this is who I am, this is the property I'm interested in, this is my offer. And you generally will fill that out, and it says that you sign it and you receive a copy of it. And it also requires, in South Australia, under South Australian law, it requires you to have that for the vendor to have received the offer. It doesn't mean he has to process it or has to give an answer, but he has to acknowledge that he's received it within 48 hours. So if you're purchasing and you're getting feedback that, oh look, the vendor hasn't seen it yet, you're actually required to be presented within 48 hours. So you're within your rights to ask to see your offer and make sure that it has been signed. Once the offer is accepted, or you've negotiated a price that everyone's happy with, you'll then proceed to one of these fellas, which is a contract. Now in South Australia, the agent actually fills out the contract and gets the vendors and the purchasers to sign it, and then it's sent off to the conveyancers for the legal transfer to be done. Now there are a number of pieces of information. What you'll find is that different people may actually use different contract. There's not one standard contract in South Australia. The contract we use is produced by the Society of Auctioneers and Appraisers. The Real Estate Institute has another one. Solicitors can create separate ones, and there are generic ones as well. So the first thing I'll tell you about the contract, and I know this almost never happens, is read through it. Have a look at what you're signing, because you are legally bound by this contract. Now yes, in South Australia, you do have a 2-day cooling off period from the end of the signing of the contract and the serving of the forms, and that's those 2 days are 2 business days. So if, for example, you signed it on a Thursday, then you'd have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. If there's a public holiday thrown in, that's extra time, so you actually get extra time. So, but read through the contract. Now there are some conditions that you can put into it. For example, it says that is it subject to anything? Is it subject to finance? Is it subject to sale? And we talked about the subject sale in a previous video about the time, about the amount that you put in and where that lies. You can actually insert other conditions, things like a building and pest inspection, a soil report. So if there is something that you're concerned about, you can have it added into the contract. If you request it, the agents can't actually say, oh no, we're not going to put that in. They're actually required to put that in. So you get the contract and you've signed that off, and the vendor signed it, so you've then purchased it. Now clause 5 of the contract, in this particular contract, is worth noting. It says, the property will be at the risk of the purchaser from the date of this contract. Now, what that means is that you have an insurable interest in the property from the signing of the contract, not from the end of the cooling off period. So we always encourage our purchasers that once you've signed the contract, get onto your insurance company and get a cover note on the property and make sure that your interest is protected. Once the contract's signed, you will then be presented either at the time of signing the contract or at some time after the signing of the contract what's called a Form 1. And the Form 1 sets out all of the legal interests in the property. It sets out, for example, first page is about who is the parties to the contract and a legal description of the land as per the contract. The second page sets out your rights to cooling off, and you need to have a read through and find out, if you decided to exercise your rights to cooling off, what is it that you have to do to legally cool off from a contract. Page 3 is a statement made by the vendors and the agents saying that they have done all the required searches. And then the following pages basically set out any interest. Is there any mortgage? Is there an easement? Is there an encumbrance? And all of those things are set out. Now, what we do at Professionals at Reynella is we actually also include a full set of the searches so that you can actually have a look through the council search, the search from the lands titles, so that you can make sure that everything has been covered in there, so there's nothing that's hidden away. It's straightforward, but it's worth making sure that you do have a read through it. When you get the Form 1, you sign to say you acknowledge receipt of it, not that you've necessarily read and understood everything. So you do have those 2 days to have a read through. If you have any queries, I always encourage you to go and have a talk to your conveyancer. They're acting on your behalf, and we're going to talk to a conveyancer in the coming weeks about what they do. But certainly get someone to have a look at it to make sure that you're happy with everything that you're signing. I'm Gary Hennessy from Professionals Reynella. That's it for this week. We hope to see you again next week, where we will be talking to our building inspector guy. We'll see you next week.